In the case of a price floor, the consumer surplus decreases from this area to this area, and the producer surplus increases from this area to this area. And this is the welfare loss created by the price floor. And in this video, I am going to be guiding you through consumer producer surplus and the welfare loss. So first of all, we need to look at allocative efficiency. Allocative efficiency happens when demand equals supply. But remember that economics is a social science, as every individual will have different circumstances at different moments in time. And the equilibrium is what is being charged and paid for. As you can see on this diagram, that demand has intersected with supply, meaning that there is the exact same quantity demanded that is supplied, making it allocatively efficient. As we can see in the diagram, there is no excess demand and no excess supply. Everyone is happy. To illustrate consumer and producer surplus, I would like you to imagine yourself at your school canteen. And in this canteen, the average price of a sandwich is $10. This will be our equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. Imagine there was a set quantity of people that did not have dinner last night, nor breakfast, nor snack. The result is that they are really hungry. So they are more than willing to pay over the equilibrium, say $40. But when this group of people go into the canteen and buy their sandwich, they only buy it for the equilibrium price, which is $10. So to them, they've made a mental profit of $30, as they themselves valued the sandwiches at $40, but they purchased them at $10. Now, there's another group of people who have had dinner, however, they have not had breakfast nor snack, and they are willing and able to pay $30 per sandwich. And as these groups of people go into the canteen, they only pay the equilibrium price, $10. So this is a mental profit of $20. And the next group of people just haven't had snack, and they are more than willing to pay $20 per sandwich, but they get it at $10, so their mental profit is $10. And our last group of people who have had dinner, breakfast, snack, and are only willing to pay the equilibrium price of $10. So this term mental profits I've talked about isn't actually called mental profit. The real term to this is called consumer surplus. And we can calculate the value of the consumer surplus. You see this gap here? It's the range between $10, which is the equilibrium price, and $40, the most that anyone would pay. And the range between $10 and $40 shows how much extra value buyers get, and that's what makes up the consumer surplus. So first of all, we need to calculate the range, which is the maximum that people are willing to pay, which is $40, and then we minus the equilibrium price, which is $10. And this gives us the value of this line here. And let's say there are 1,000 students that go to the canteen every day. We multiply this by 1,000. And in order to find the value of a triangle, we need to divide this by 2. So the value of the consumer surplus in this example is $15,000. The same concept applies for the producer surplus. For example, your school canteen has got 5 different vendors, and they are willing and able to sell their sandwiches at the price of $2. However, the equilibrium price is $10. So they make a mental gain of $8. There'll be a few vendors that are willing and able to supply their sandwiches at $6. However, as the equilibrium is $10, that is a mental gain of $4. Next, there is a supplier that's willing and able to sell their sandwiches at $8, which is a $2 mental gain, and there is a supplier that's willing and able to sell their sandwiches at the equilibrium price of $10. Again, this is not called the mental gains, this is called the producer surplus. And you see this gap here? It's the range between $2, which is the lowest price producers are willing to accept, and $10, the price eventually everyone receives. So this $2 to $10 range shows how much extra benefit sellers get, and that's what makes up the producer surplus. And in order to calculate the producer surplus, take the equilibrium price, which is $10, and we minus it by $2, which is the lowest price that producers are willing to accept. And then we multiply that by the quantity, and then we divide that by 2. And the producer surplus is $4,000. If we bring it all together, the sum of the consumer and producer surplus is what we call the social surplus. And in my example, the consumer surplus is $15,000 and the producer surplus is $4,000, which makes the social surplus $19,000. And just to reiterate that this diagram demonstrates allocative efficiency as demand is equal to supply, as consumer has got the right quantities and producers has sold the right quantities. And if there is an imbalance between demand and supply, these consumer and producer surpluses will be lost. This will be called the welfare or deadweight loss. Moving on to what happens to consumer and producer surplus in the case of a price ceiling. Due to the price ceiling, the price is forced down from PE to PC. So in the case of our cafeteria at school, the price of all sandwiches will now cost $6. So the result of this price ceiling that the sellers of sandwiches will reduce their output from QE to QS. So let's say from 1,000 sandwiches down to 500. And because of the decrease in quantity supplied, a smaller number of people are able to buy it at the lower price of PC. Prior to the price ceiling, there were 1,000 students who demanded sandwiches and 1,000 sandwiches available. And after the price ceiling, there are only 500 sandwiches available. And this point here represents the 500 students that were able to buy it at the lower price. Before the price ceiling, these were mutually beneficial trades. But these trades no longer take place due to the price ceiling. And as you can see, the area shaded in the red is the consumer and producer surplus that has been taken away. This is called the welfare loss or deadweight loss. Now moving on to price floors and its effect on consumer and producer surplus. The price floor will increase the price from PE to PC. And due to the price increase, the demand will contract from QE to QD. So let's imagine that demand contracted to only 200 sandwiches, as this gap here is the range of prices that people are willing to pay. And the quantity demanded in my example is 200 sandwiches. In the case of suppliers, they are more than willing to sell their sandwiches at QS at the price PC. The reason for this is that the suppliers will get more revenue for each sandwich sold, as the incentive to make a profit is significantly higher. Even though suppliers are willing to sell at QS, they are only met with very limited demand of QD, which is 200 units. So the suppliers are only able to sell QD amount of units, which is represented here on the diagram. And similar to before, these were mutually beneficial trades that didn't happen, which creates the welfare loss. Now moving on to the impact of a tax to consumer and producer surplus. In the free market, the demand curve and the supply curve will intersect, giving us PE and Q1. There is no loss in welfare. As you can see, the consumer and producer surplus are maximized. But when a tax is applied, the supply curve shifts from S1 to S2 plus tax. You can see that the consumer surplus falls and the producer surplus also falls, and the purple box in the middle is the tax revenue collected by the government. And the orange box created here is called the welfare or the dead weight loss. I hope that helped. I hope you guys have a good day. Bye bye.